She served late-night tacos to everyone. Drunk college kids, tired bankers, random strangers. But she completely ignored the pale man in expensive coat standing silently at the back of the line. When everyone finally left and she tried to close up, he stepped forward and whispered 6 words that made her blood run cold. "You owe me a debt. Still remember me." What she didn't know, 10 years ago, she'd made a deal to survive. And tonight, the bill came due. The fluorescent menu board above Rena's food truck flickered at 2:47 a.m., casting jittery shadows across the empty Financial District Plaza. She'd been flipping burgers and wrapping tacos for 14 hours straight, and her lower back felt like someone had replaced her spine with rusty metal. 2 breakfast burritos, extra hot sauce, slurred a guy in a wrinkled suit, his tie hanging loose like a noose he'd barely escaped. Rena forced a smile, her 5th, or was it 15th, of the night. Coming right up. The late-night crowd was always the same. Overworked investment bankers who'd missed dinner. Drunk 20-somethings stumbling out of clubs. Uber drivers grabbing something quick between rides. They blurred together into a sea of demanding voices and waving credit cards. She'd named her truck Rena's Revival, a stupid play on words about food bringing people back to life. If only they knew how literal that was. "Ma'am, I've been waiting for like 3 minutes," whined a college girl with smeared mascara. "Almost done," Rena muttered, sliding the burritos across the counter. Her hands moved automatically, scoop, wrap, fold, seal. Mechanical.
Numb.
The line finally dwindled. One by one, her customers scattered into the night, leaving greasy napkins and forgotten receipts fluttering across the pavement. Rena started wiping down the griddle, already mentally checking out. She had to be back here in 9 hours. That's when she noticed him. He stood 15 feet away, perfectly still, hands in the pockets of an expensive black coat that looked like it cost more than her entire truck. Pale skin, dark hair swept back. He hadn't been in line before. She would have remembered someone dressed like they'd walked out of a Victorian painting. "Sorry, we're closed," Rena called out, not looking up from the griddle. Silence. She glanced over.
He was closer now.
Maybe 10 feet. She hadn't heard him move. "I said we're." "You owe me a debt." Little Baker, his voice was soft, cold, like wind through a cemetery. "Still remember me?" The metal spatula slipped from Rena's fingers, clattering against the steel counter. Her heart stopped, restarted, then hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack.
No. 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 No.
She'd been so careful. Changed her name from Marina to Rena. Moved from Portland to San Francisco. Deleted every social media account. Paid for everything in cash for 2 years until she was sure she'd disappeared completely. 10 years. The deal was for 10 years. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but her hands were already shaking. He stepped into the light of her truck, and Rena's entire body went cold. She knew that face. Sharp cheekbones. Eyes so dark they looked black. The same face that had leaned over her in a rain-soaked alley when she was 18, her body broken on the pavement, blood filling her mouth. "I can give you another chance," he'd said then. 10 years of life. All I ask is a single drop of your blood when the time comes. Do we have a deal?" She'd been dying. A hit-and-run driver had mounted the curb, crushed her against a brick wall, and kept going. She'd watched her own blood spreading across the concrete like spilled paint, felt her lungs filling with fluid.
She'd said yes.
And for 10 years, she'd been alive.
Healthy. Whole.
But when the 10th anniversary came, last spring, on a rainy Tuesday that felt too much like the night she'd died, fear had swallowed her whole. She'd packed a single backpack, withdrawn all her savings, and vanished. "Calyx," she breathed. He tilted his head slightly, almost amused. "So you do remember." I needed more time." "Time," he said the word like it was funny. "You had a decade, Rena. I gave you life when you were bleeding out in the gutter. I asked for 1 drop of blood.
1.
And you ran." Her throat tightened. "I was scared." "Everyone is scared," his voice hardened. "But they don't break their word." Rena's mind raced. She looked around the empty plaza. No witnesses, no one to help. Her phone was in the truck, but even if she called 911, what would she say? A vampire wants to collect on a blood debt. Please, she started, but Calix held up a hand. I'm not here to punish you. That caught her off guard. What? I'm here to warn you, he glanced over his shoulder, scanning the dark buildings surrounding the plaza. You broke the contract. That created a problem. What kind of problem? Calix's jaw tightened. The kind that's hunting both of us right now. Before Rena could respond, the lights inside her food truck went out. Not flickered, died, like something had cut the power completely. Then the metal walls began to buckle. Rena stumbled backward as the truck's side panel compressed inward with a screech of tortured steel, like an invisible giant was squeezing it in his fist. The smell of hot metal and ozone flooded the air. Get down, Calix lunged forward, pulling her away from the truck just as the rear window exploded outward in a spray of glass. 3 figures materialized from the shadows, tall, impossibly fast, their faces covered by smooth white masks that reflected the distant streetlights. They wore dark tactical gear, and each carried a blade that gleamed silver and wrong, like it was made of frozen moonlight. Calix the Collector, one of them said, voice distorted and hollow behind the mask. Your protection contract is void. Surrender, and the girl lives. Calix stepped in front of Rena, his entire posture changing, shoulders back, hands loose at his sides. She's under my protection. She's the mark, the hunter pointed a blade at Rena. The bond still glows. You haven't severed it. I will. Too late, the hunter's mask tilted. The throne wants you dead, Collector. Every debtor you've hidden, every contract you've forged, they all die with you. Starting with her. Rena's breath caught. She didn't understand half of what they were saying, but she understood one thing clearly. These people were here to kill her. Her hand closed around the handle of a cast-iron skillet she'd been meaning to clean. Rena, don't, Calix started. She hurled the skillet with everything she had. It hit the lead hunter square in the mask, cracking the smooth surface. The figure staggered backward, hissing in surprise. Run, Rena shouted. Calix grabbed her wrist, and they ran. They crashed through the back alleys of the financial district, Rena's sneakers slapping against wet pavement. Calix moved like liquid shadow beside her, pulling her around corners she couldn't see coming, his grip on her wrist cold and iron strong. Where are we going? She gasped. Somewhere they can't track us. Keep moving. Behind them, the sound of footsteps echoed, not running, but walking. Steady. Patient. Like the hunters knew they'd catch up eventually. Calix yanked her into a narrow passage between 2 buildings, so tight their shoulders scraped brick on both sides. 20 feet in, he stopped, pressing his back against the wall. His chest didn't move. He wasn't breathing hard. Wasn't breathing at all. Rena bent over, hands on her knees, lungs burning. What the hell is happening? The bond, Calix said quietly, eyes fixed on the alley entrance. When you ran, you weakened it but didn't break it. That made me vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? Those masked freaks. Vampire hunters. Assassins, his jaw clenched. Employed by the one who took my throne. Rena's head snapped up. Throne? You said you were a collector. I am. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something other than cold control in his eyes. Exhaustion. I need you to remember everything, Rena. The night you died. I don't want to. You have to, he grabbed her shoulders, and suddenly the world tilted. The memories slammed into her like a freight train. 10 years ago. Rain hammering down. Rena, Marina then, was walking home from her shift at the bakery, earbuds in, hood up. She'd just turned 18 2 weeks earlier. Her acceptance letter to culinary school was folded in her backpack. She never saw the car. One moment she was stepping off the curb. The next, impact, her body folding, bones snapping like dry twigs, her skull cracking against brick. The driver didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. She lay there in the rain, tasting copper, watching her blood mix with water and flow toward the storm drain. Her phone had skittered 15 feet away. No one was around. The bakery district was dead at 3 a.m. She was going to die alone in an alley, and no one would find her until morning. Then he appeared. Calix knelt beside her, his coat somehow dry despite the downpour. "Marina Bennett," he said softly. "You're dying."
She tried to speak.
Blood bubbled from her lips. "I can give you another chance," he continued. 10 years of life. Healthy.
Whole.
You'll finish school, start your business, live your dreams. All I ask is a single drop of your blood when the time comes. One drop, freely given. Do we have a deal? She tried to ask why. Why her? Why blood? Why any of this? But her vision was fading, lungs filling with fluid, and all she could think was, I don't want to die.
I'm 18.
I haven't done anything yet. She nodded. Calix placed his palm over her heart. Then live, little baker. And remember, in 10 years, I'll come to collect. Warmth flooded through her. Her bones knitted back together, ribs straightening, skull healing. The pain vanished. She gasped, drawing in clean air, and when she looked down, her clothes were still bloody, but her body was perfect. Calix was gone. She'd stagger home, thrown away her ruined clothes, and stood in the shower for an hour trying to convince herself it was a hallucination. A near-death dream. But she was alive. Impossibly, completely alive. The memory released her, and Rena stumbled backward, gasping. I remember, she whispered. You saved me. I gave you a choice, Calix corrected. And you made a deal. Blood for life. That's how it works. But why? Her voice cracked. Why me? Why offer that deal at all? Calix was quiet for a moment. Because I was there. Because you were dying. Because he exhaled slowly. Because I've made that deal 1,000 times over 3 centuries. I find people on the edge of death, accident victims, terminal patients, those with nothing left, and I offer them a decade. Most accept. Some refuse. And in 10 years, you take their blood. 1 drop. That's all. It sustains me, yes, but more importantly, it completes the contract. Cleanly. Safely, his eyes darkened. When you ran, Rena, you left the contract open. Unfinished. That created a psychic tether between us, a glowing mark that anyone with the right magic can track. The hunters. They're not hunting you. They're hunting me. But they track me through you. Through every debtor whose contract I haven't completed. He leaned closer. You were the last one, Rena. I'd closed every other contract. Freed everyone else. You were supposed to be the final thread. Guilt crashed over her. I didn't know. Of course you didn't, his voice wasn't angry. Just tired. But now we're both marked. And they won't stop until I'm dead, and every connection to my power is severed. Footsteps echoed at the alley entrance. Time's up, Calix said. Do you trust me? Rena looked at the vampire who'd saved her life, who she'd betrayed, who was now asking for her faith. Do I have a choice? Always, he extended his hand. But choose quickly. She took it, and they ran deeper into the dark. They emerged from the alley into an industrial area Rena didn't recognize, warehouses with broken windows, rusted fire escapes clinging to brick walls like metal skeletons. The air smelled of oil and old garbage. Calix finally stopped behind a dumpster, pulling Rena down beside him. She pressed her back against cold metal, trying to catch her breath. Why are they really after you? She asked. There's more to this than just contracts. Calix glanced at her, something like respect flickering across his face. You're perceptive. I'm terrified and confused, but I'm not stupid. She wiped sweat from her forehead. You said someone took your throne. What throne? He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I wasn't always a collector. 200 years ago, I ruled the Western Vampire territories. But I didn't want to be a king. I wanted to help people. So I made a choice that other vampires considered weak. The deals. Yes. Instead of killing to feed, I offered bargains. Life extensions for those who were dying anyway. protection for those who had none. In exchange, they'd give me small amounts of blood over time, enough to sustain me without destroying them. His voice grew bitter. The other nobles saw it as an insult. Vampires are supposed to be predators, not merchants. So, they overthrew you. One did.
Matthias keine.
He challenged me, defeated me, and took the throne 50 years ago. I've been in hiding ever since, closing out my remaining contracts, trying to disappear. He looked at her. You were the last one. The only thread still connecting me to my old power. Rena's stomach sank. And if they kill you, every person I've ever made a deal with becomes vulnerable. The magic that protects them dies with me. Dozens of people who trusted me would be exposed, former debtors who've built new lives, who have families now, who deserve to be free. But you said you freed them already. I severed the contracts, yes. But the psychic imprint remains until I die. Matthias can't find them while I'm alive. But the moment I'm gone, he didn't finish. A sound made them both freeze, the scrape of metal on concrete, close by. They're still tracking us, Rena whispered. Not us. Me. Calix pulled back his sleeve, revealing his forearm. In the dim light, Rena saw it, a faint, glowing mark, like a brand burned into his skin. It pulsed with a sickly blue light. What is that? The bond. Your blood still calls to mine, even unfulfilled. It's like a beacon. He met her eyes. That's why they found me, Rena. I didn't track you down, they did. They've been hunting me for months, following every psychic thread, and when they found this 1 inch, he gestured to the mark. They followed it straight to you. Horror washed over her. So this is my fault. No, his voice was firm. This is Matthias's doing. He wants me dead, so he can't be challenged. Wants my debtors dead, so there's no one left who remembers the old way, when vampires didn't have to be monsters. But I ran. If I'd just given you the blood. You were scared. That's human, he almost smiled. I've lived 3 centuries, Rena. Fear is the most honest thing about your species. A figure dropped from the fire escape above, landing between them and the street exit. White mask gleaming. Silver blade drawn. Found you, the hunter said. 2 more dropped down behind them, cutting off the alley. They moved in synchronized steps, forming a triangle around their position. Calix stood slowly, positioning himself between Rena and the hunters. She's not part of this. She's the anchor. The lead hunter pointed his blade at Rena. The mark glows brightest through her. Kill her, and you lose your last connection to the old power. Kill you, and Matthias claims everything. You're not killers, Calix said quietly. You're soldiers following orders. Walk away. The hunter laughed, cold and hollow. We don't want to be soldiers anymore, Collector. We want to be free. Matthias promised us our own territories when you're gone. Promised us we could hunt again without your righteous interference. So you'd murder an innocent woman for land? She's not innocent. She's a debtor who broke contract. The hunter took a step forward. That makes her fair game. Rena's hand found a broken pipe beside the dumpster. It wasn't much, but it was something. Last chance, Calix said, and his voice dropped to something ancient and dangerous. Leave her alone. Or what? You'll fight. The hunter's mask tilted mockingly. You're half-starved, Collector. You haven't fed properly in weeks. You can barely stand. It was true. Rena could see it now. The way Calix's hands trembled slightly, the hollow look around his eyes, the way he leaned against the wall like he needed support. How long since you've eaten? She whispered. 6 weeks. Maybe 7 inch. He didn't look at her. I can only feed from willing debtors. And there's only one left. The hunters moved as one, blades raised. Rena made her choice. She grabbed Calix's wrist and pressed the broken pipe against her palm, drawing blood. Then eat, she said. No. Calix jerked away from her bleeding hand. Not like this. The hunters struck. The lead hunter moved impossibly fast, blades slicing through the air where Calix's throat had been a heartbeat before. Calix twisted, vampiric speed finally kicking in despite his weakened state, and caught the hunter's wrist. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the alley. The The hunter screamed, a distorted, inhuman sound behind the mask, and dropped the blade. But the other two were already moving, flanking from both sides. "Rena, run!" Calix shouted, hurling the injured hunter into the dumpster with enough force to dent the metal. But Rena didn't run. She couldn't, because behind the advancing hunters, she saw something that made her blood freeze. The warehouses around them were occupied. Faces appeared in broken windows, street kids huddled around barrel fires, homeless families sheltering from the cold, night shift workers cutting through on their way home. At least 15 people, maybe more, all about to witness a supernatural bloodbath. Or become part of it. "There are people here," she shouted. Calix's had snapped toward the windows, and she saw the calculation flash across his face. If he fought at full strength, used his real power, these bystanders would see things they shouldn't. Become targets themselves. Matthias's hunters would kill them just to eliminate witnesses. The second hunter lunged at Calix, with a blade aimed at his heart. Calix caught it barehanded, the silver burning his palm, smoke rising from his skin. He twisted, redirecting the thrust into the brick wall, where the blade shattered. "You're protecting humans even now?" The hunter snarled. "That's why you'll lose. That's why I've lasted 3 centuries. Calix shot back. The third hunter went for Rena. She swung the pipe wildly, more panic than technique, and somehow connected with the hunter's mask. It cracked down the center, and for a split second, she saw what was underneath, a face that was human once, but wrong now, eyes too large and filled with swirling darkness. The hunter backhanded her. Rena flew backward, hitting the ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Stars exploded across her vision. The pipe clattered away. "Rena." Calix's voice was raw with something she'd never heard from him before, fear. The hunter stood over her, blade raised. "Should have stayed dead the first time, girl." Rena's hand scrambled across the pavement, finding purchase on something, a metal grate covering a drainage pipe. She ripped it up with strength born from pure adrenaline and swung. The edge caught the hunter across the knee, and the creature buckled. "Screw your throne." Rena gasped, scrambling backward. The food truck. The thought hit her like lightning. Her truck was only 3 blocks back, and inside it, propane tanks, hot oil, industrial equipment. Things that burned. Things that exploded. Calix. She pointed desperately in the direction they'd come from. The truck. He understood immediately. "Can you make it? Can you?" The first hunter was climbing out of the dumpster, mask half-shattered, face twisted in rage. The second was pulling another blade from his belt. The third was getting back up despite the damaged knee. They had seconds. "Go!" Calix grabbed a metal trash can lid and hurled it like a discus at the nearest streetlight. Glass exploded, plunging half the alley into darkness. "I'll keep them busy." "That's a terrible plan." "Then we're even for the broken contract." "Go." Rena ran. She burst from the alley and sprinted back toward the plaza, her ribs screaming with every breath, her split palm leaving a trail of blood drops on the sidewalk. Behind her, she heard the sounds of fighting. Metal on metal, bodies hitting walls, Calix's voice shouting something in a language that sounded like Latin mixed with smoke. She rounded the corner and saw her truck, still crumpled where the hunters had crushed it, front panel hanging loose. "Please still work," she prayed, yanking open the side door. The propane was intact. The fryer oil was still hot. She'd been in the middle of closing when everything went to hell. And her emergency supplies were underneath the counter. Lighter fluid for the camping stove, the fire extinguisher, a road flare she kept for breakdowns. Rena's hands moved on autopilot, years of kitchen work making her efficient even in terror. She yanked the propane tank loose, twisted the valve open slightly, then grabbed the container of fryer oil, still scorching hot, and positioned it near the truck's back door. She heard footsteps pounding toward her. Multiple sets. Working faster, she pulled out the road flare, the lighter fluid, and doused the area between her truck and the alley entrance. Then she grabbed the fire extinguisher, not to put out a fire, but as a weapon, and climbed onto the truck's roof. Calix burst into the plaza first, moving at a dead sprint. His coat was torn, blood, his own or theirs, she couldn't tell, splattered across his face. He was limping. All three hunters poured out of the alley 5 seconds behind him. "Rena, what are you?" "Jump," she screamed. Calix's eyes went wide as he saw her set up, and he leapt, vampiric strength carrying him up to the truck's roof in one impossible bound. Rena struck the road flare, the red flame hissing to life. "Bad night for you guys," she shouted and threw it. The lighter fluid ignited first, a wall of flame erupting between the hunters and the truck. They skidded to a halt. Then Rena kicked the propane tank off the roof. It tumbled through the flames, valve hissing, and rolled toward the hunter's feet. "Run!" Calix grabbed her, and they jumped off the back of the truck, hitting the pavement running. Behind them, the explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun. The blast threw them forward, heat searing across Rena's back. She felt Calix's arms wrap around her, twisting midair so his body took the impact when they hit the ground. They rolled across the concrete, and she heard him grunt in pain. "Move!" He dragged her to her feet, and they ran as debris rained down behind them, twisted metal, burning rubber, chunks of what used to be her livelihood. Rena risked a glance back. The plaza was an inferno. Her truck was gone, just a flaming skeleton. And through the smoke, she saw shapes moving.
Slow.
Staggered. But still moving. "They're not dead," she gasped. "They're not alive either." Harder to kill, Calix pulled her toward a street corner, then down a flight of concrete stairs she'd never noticed before. The sign above read, "Closed for maintenance. Authorized personnel only." He kicked the chain-link gate off its hinges, and they plunged into darkness. The smell hit her first, damp concrete, rust, and something ancient. The air was cooler, stale. Emergency lights flickered every 30 feet, casting everything in sickly yellow. "Where are we?" Rena whispered. "Old subway tunnels." City abandoned this line in the 70s. Calix moved with certainty despite the darkness, leading her deeper. They rebuilt the system, but these tunnels still connect to the new ones. Most people don't even know they exist. They walked for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. Rena's legs burned, her lungs ached, and her hand, the one she'd cut, throbbed with every heartbeat. She'd wrapped it in a torn piece of her shirt, but blood was still seeping through. Finally, Calix stopped in a wider section where 3 tunnels converged. Ancient advertisements still clung to the walls, faded posters for movies from the 1960s, soap that promised to change your life, cigarettes with doctors' endorsements. He leaned against the wall and slid down slowly, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. "Are you okay?" Rena knelt beside him. No, his voice was barely audible. "I used too much strength. Haven't fed enough. He closed his eyes. "I'm close to fading." Fading. What happens when a vampire starves? We don't die easily, but we can go dormant. Sleep for decades, sometimes centuries, until someone wakes us. He looked at her. "But if I fade now, while the bond is still active, you'll be completely exposed. They'll track you down in hours." Rena's mind raced. "Then take my blood. You said you needed it." From a willing debtor, given freely, as payment for a completed contract, his jaw clenched.
This isn't that.
This would be survival feeding, and it creates a different kind of bond. Stronger. More permanent. "I don't care." "You should." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw genuine fear in them. "If I feed from you now, out of desperation, I could take too much. I could bind you to me in ways the original deal never would have. You'd feel what I feel. Know where I am. Be connected to me until one of us dies. Better than being dead." "Is it?" He laughed bitterly. "You already ran from me once, Rena. You think you want to be shackled to a vampire for the rest of your life?" She sat back on her heels, processing. He was right. She'd been so terrified of the original deal that she'd upended her entire existence to escape it. And now she was volunteering for something worse. But the alternative was letting him fade, leaving her defenseless, and probably dying before sunrise. "Tell me the truth," she said quietly. About the bond. About what happens when you make these deals. Calix was silent for a long moment. Then he started talking. When I offer someone 10 years of life, I'm not just healing them. I'm tethering their life force to mine. It keeps them alive, healthy, protected from natural death during that time. But it also creates a psychic thread between us. Not strong enough for them to notice, usually. Just enough that I can find them when the time comes. And the blood payment breaks the thread, completes the circuit. They give back a drop of what I gave them, life for life, and the deal is settled.
Clean.
Final. They walk away completely free, he looked at her. That's why I've spent 3 centuries doing this. It's the only way to feed without destroying people. But I broke it. You left it unfinished. The thread is still there, still glowing, still connecting us. That's what they're tracking. He gestured weakly to his arm, where the mark pulsed faintly. Every person I've made a deal with had the same mark until I closed their contract. You're the only one left. Rena stared at the glowing brand. So, if you take my blood now, it won't close the contract. It'll just make the bond stronger. And these hunters have magic that can track bonds like that for miles. We'd be painting an even bigger target. Then what do? I don't know, the admission seemed to cost him. I've never had a debtor run before. Never had an incomplete contract for this long. The magic is unstable. I can't predict what will happen if I try to close it now, or if I feed to survive, or if I... Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them, distant, but getting closer. They followed us, Rena breathed. Calix tried to stand and immediately collapsed.
Can't
fight anymore. Rena made a decision. She grabbed his arm, hauling him up with strength she didn't know she had. Then we hide. Come on. Where? Deeper, she pulled him toward the darkest tunnel, the one where the emergency lights had all burned out. They can track the bond, but they still need to see us to kill us. Right. He managed a weak smile. You're learning. They disappeared into the darkness, and behind them, white masks gleamed in the emergency lights. The tunnel narrowed until they had to walk single file, Rena leading with one hand trailing along the damp wall, Calix stumbling behind her. His breathing had become labored, an affectation more than necessity, she realized. Vampires didn't need to breathe, which meant he was doing it out of habit. Or because he was too weak to maintain the illusion of control. There, Calix whispered, pointing to a gap in the wall where bricks had crumbled away. Rena squeezed through into a hidden corridor beyond. It was older than the tunnel, much older. The walls were rough-hewn stone instead of concrete, held together with ancient mortar. Someone had carved channels into the floor for water drainage centuries ago. What is this place?
Smuglier's Passage.
Predates the subway by 100 years. Calix leaned heavily against the wall, sliding down until he sat. I used to use it when I needed to move through the city unseen. Rena pulled out her phone, miraculously still intact, and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept across the corridor, and she froze. Names. Dozens of them, carved into the stone walls. Thomas Chun, 1847.
Margaret O'Sullivan, 1889.
James Rodriguez, 1923. Kenji Yamamoto, 1945. Sarah Mitchell, 1978. The list went on and on, some names barely legible, worn smooth by time and water. But what made Rena's heart clench were the marks beside each name. Some had simple checkmarks. Others had crosses. A few had symbols she didn't recognize, circles, stars, spirals. What is this? She breathed. My ledger. Calix's voice was heavy with something that might have been grief. Every person I've made a deal with over the past 3 centuries. I carved their names here when the contract was made. Marked them when it was completed. Rena moved closer, examining the symbols. What do the different marks mean? Checkmark means they fulfilled the contract and walked away free. Cross means they died before the 10 years were up. Natural causes, accidents, things even my magic couldn't prevent, he paused. The circles mean I found a way to release them from the contract early. Found them a cure or a better solution. or convince them they didn't need my bargain after all. And the others? The stars and spirals. Stars are the ones I had to relocate, give new identities to when staying where they were became too dangerous. His eyes closed. Spirals are the ones Matthias's people found and killed before I could protect them. Rena counted them quickly. 7 spirals. 7 people dead because of a vampire's political game. She kept scanning the walls, her flashlight beam traveling down the corridor. More names, more marks. And then, near the end,
Marina Bennett, 2015.
her name. Her real name. No mark beside it. I carved it the night I saved you, Calix said quietly. Came back here after, added you to the list. I was going to mark it with a checkmark last spring, close out the last contract, and disappear forever. But I ran. You ran. He looked at the empty space beside her name. And now I don't know what symbol to use. You're not free. You're not dead. You're just suspended. Neither in nor out. Rena's chest tightened. She thought of all these people, over 100 names on these walls, who'd been dying and accepted Calix's bargain. How many of them had been as terrified as she was? How many had wanted to run but didn't? Did anyone else try to break the contract? 3. Calix pointed to names scattered across different decades. 1 panicked and tried to skip town. I found him, we talked, he completed the deal. 1 attempted suicide, thinking death would void the contract. I saved her, got her real help, therapy, medication, and released her from the bargain with a circle. The 3rd. He trailed off, and Rena followed his gaze to a name near the top. Elizabeth Thorne, 1847. It had a spiral. She ran like you did. Hid for 2 years before Matthias's predecessor found her. They tortured her for information about me, then killed her to send a message. His voice went flat. I found her body in the river. That's when I learned that breaking a contract doesn't free anyone. It just makes them prey. The weight of it crashed over Rena. All these people who'd trusted him. All these lives he'd saved, then spent centuries protecting. And she'd nearly ruined it all because she was too scared to give a single drop of blood. Why do you do this? She asked. Why not just hunt, kill, feed the way other vampires do? Calix was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I was human once. Long time ago. I remember what it felt like to be powerless, to watch people I loved die while I could do nothing. He looked at his hands. When I became this, I promised myself I'd never be the reason someone felt that helpless. Every person whose name is on this wall, I gave them a choice. Maybe not a good choice, but a choice nonetheless. That's why Matthias hates you. That's why he fears me. Because if vampires don't have to be monsters, then his entire reign is built on a lie. Calix's eyes met hers. He can't let me live, Rena. Can't let any evidence of my deal survive. Because if people knew there was another way. Footsteps echoed in the main tunnel.
Closer now.
Rena quickly turned off her phone light, plunging them into absolute darkness. A voice called out, distorted and cold. We can smell your blood, girl. The collector's too weak to fight. Surrender him, and we'll give you a quick death. Rena felt Calix's hand find hers in the dark. His skin was ice cold. Don't, he whispered. She squeezed his hand. Not a chance. They sat in perfect silence, pressed against the stone wall in the hidden corridor. Rena could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel Calix's grip on her hand growing weaker by the minute. The hunters moved through the main tunnel with deliberate slowness, boots scraping against concrete. They weren't rushing. They knew their prey was trapped. Come out, Collector, one called. You're fading. We can feel it in the bond. Another hour, maybe less, and you'll slip into dormancy. Then the girl dies alone, and we take our time with it. Rena felt Calix's entire body tense beside her. She leaned close to his ear, barely breathing the words. How do we get out? We don't. His voice was almost inaudible. This corridor dead ends 50 feet ahead. I thought. Hoped they wouldn't find the entrance. So we're trapped.
I'm trapped.
You can still. Don't, she cut him off. Don't you dare tell me to surrender. I've spent 10 years running from one bad decision. I'm not making another. The flashlight beams swept closer to the gap in the wall. Any second now, they'd find it. Calix's head lolled against her shoulder. I'm sorry, little baker. You deserved better than this. And that's when it hit her, the horrible, beautiful clarity of what needed to happen. You said you can only feed from willing debtors, she whispered urgently. Blood given freely as payment for the contract. Yes, but what if I give it freely now? What if I complete the deal? It won't work. The bond is corrupted. The contract's been broken too long. You don't know that, she grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her even though they couldn't see each other in the dark. You said you've never had a debtor run before. You don't know what happens if they come back and finish it. Rena, listen to me. You saved my life. You gave me 10 years I never should have had. I got to finish culinary school. I started my own business. I lived, her voice cracked. I was so scared of losing that, of owing someone, that I forgot the whole reason I had anything to lose in the first place. You gave me that. Calix's breath hitched. You don't owe me gratitude. I owe you a debt. That was the deal. She fumbled in the darkness for something sharp, her fingers finding a piece of broken stone with a jagged edge. One drop of blood, freely given. That's what you asked for 10 years ago. That's what I'm giving you now. The bond could consume you, could tie you to me permanently. Then I'll deal with that if we survive the next 10 minutes. She pressed the stone against her palm, the one she'd already cut earlier, reopening the wound. Blood welled up, hot and slick. I'm choosing this, Calix.
Me. Right now.
That makes it willing, doesn't it? The flashlight beams were at the gap now, probing the darkness. Found something, a hunter shouted. Rena grabbed Calix's hand and pressed her bleeding palm against his mouth. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Calix gasped, a drowning man breaking the surface, and his lips closed around the wound. The effect was instantaneous. Power flooded through the connection between them, and Rena felt it, a rush of sensation that was part euphoria, part terror, part something she had no words for. She could feel Calix's hunger, his desperation, his iron will fighting to take only what was needed and not a drop more. The mark on his arm blazed with brilliant blue light, so bright it illuminated the entire corridor. And then it shattered. The psychic bond exploded like a breaking chain, fragments of light shooting outward and dissolving into nothing. Rena felt the tether between them snap, not severing, but transforming into something different. Something completed. Calix released her hand, and when he looked at her, his eyes were clear, alert.
Alive.
You finished it, he whispered in awe. After all this time, you actually finished it. The hunters burst through the gap, white masks gleaming. Calix stood in one fluid motion, and he was different now. Not the exhausted, hunted creature from before, but something ancient and powerful and very, very dangerous. Gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying 3 centuries of authority. You made a mistake. The lead hunter raised his blade. You're still outnumbered.
Calix moved.
Rena had seen him fight before, but this was different. This was a vampire at full strength, fed and furious, and fighting to protect someone he'd made a promise to. He was a blur of movement, disarming the first hunter before the man could blink, using the captured blade to shatter the second hunter's mask. The third hunter lunged at Rena. But Calix was already there, catching the blade barehanded. It burned his skin, but he didn't let go. He twisted, snapping the weapon in half, and drove the broken end into the hunter's shoulder. The hunter screamed and stumbled backward. The bond is broken, Calix said coldly. You can't track me anymore. I can't track any of my debtors. Your advantage is gone. The hunters exchanged glances, and Rena saw it, the moment they realized they'd lost. Matthias will send others. The lead hunter spat blood. Then I'll be waiting. Calix's smile was all teeth. And now I'm not starving anymore. Tell your king the collector remembers every name on his list. Every person he's killed. When I come for his throne, and I will come, I'll be bringing their ghosts with me. The hunters fled. Rena slid down the wall, shaking uncontrollably, adrenaline finally crashing. Calix knelt beside her. Are you all right? She laughed, slightly hysterical. I just blew up my food truck, completed a blood contract with a vampire, and helped fight off supernatural assassins.
I'm fantastic.
He smiled, genuine this time. Thank you, little baker. Rena, she corrected. Call me Rena. Thank you, Rena. They emerged from the tunnels an hour before dawn, climbing up through a maintenance hatch in the warehouse district. The air above ground felt impossibly fresh after hours underground, and Rena gulped it down like water. Where do we go now? She asked, looking around at the empty streets. Her apartment was out, too obvious. The food truck was scrap metal. She had exactly $43 in her pocket and no plan. Somewhere they won't think to look. Calix started walking west, toward the waterfront. Somewhere even Matthias's hunters won't follow. Where's that? The night market. 20 minutes later, they stood at the end of Pier 39, where tourists normally crowded during the day to watch sea lions and buy overpriced souvenirs. Now, at 4 a.m., it should have been deserted. Instead, it was packed. Rena stared in disbelief. Hundreds of people moved between stalls and vendors that definitely hadn't been there during normal hours. Strings of lights, some electric, some that glowed with no visible power source, crisscrossed overhead. The air smelled of incense, fried food, seawater, and something else. Something like ozone and copper and old books. What is this? She breathed. The real San Francisco. Calix led her down the pier, past a vendor selling bottles of fog. Genuine Carl the Fog, harvested at full moon. Another offering maps that rewrote themselves. A third with jewelry that whispered when you got close. Every city has one. A place where the supernatural community does business. Markets, trades, information. Humans can stumble in occasionally, but most don't remember it afterward. A woman with violet eyes and scales running down her neck called out, "Fresh catches. Mermaid scales, kraken ink, selkie tears." A man in a top hat that seemed to be made of smoke offered. Futures told, pasts revised, presents negotiated. Rena grabbed Calix's arm. Are those people? Not people? Some are human. Most aren't. Witches, shifters, fae, spirits, other vampires. All protected by market law, no violence, no hunting, no killing on market grounds. He steered her past a stall selling what looked like bottled starlight. It's neutral territory. The one place Matthias's hunters can't touch us. Can't or won't. Both. Breaking market law means being banned from every supernatural market worldwide. No vampire would risk that, not even for a throne. They wound through the crowd until Calix stopped at a small stall tucked between a fortune teller and someone selling what appeared to be living shadows in mason jars. The stall had no sign, just a table covered in black velvet and a woman sitting behind it. She was ancient, not just old, but ancient in a way that made Rena's bones ache just looking at her. Her eyes were milky white, completely blind, but somehow Rena knew the woman could see everything. "Calix the Collector," the woman said, her voice like whined through dead leaves. "You've been absent from my table for 50 years. Hello, Sybil." Calix bowed slightly. "I need information." "Everyone does." The blind oracle tilted her head toward Rena. "And you brought a debtor. How unusual. Usually they run screaming from you after the contract completes." "She's different," Calix said quietly. "I can see that." Sybil gestured to 2 empty chairs across from her.
Seat.
"This reading will cost you dearly, Collector." They sat. Rena's hands wouldn't stop shaking, so she clasped them in her lap. Sybil reached across the table, her gnarled fingers finding Rena's hands with eerie precision. "You're afraid. Terrified," Rena admitted.
Good.
"Fear means you're paying attention." The oracle's grip tightened. "You want to know if you'll survive the night. If the hunters will find you. If completing the blood debt was enough. Can you tell us?" Calix leaned forward. Sybil was silent for a long moment, her blind eyes seeming to stare through both of them into some distant, terrible future. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed, layered, like multiple people talking at once. The bond is broken, but the hunt continues. Matthias doesn't care about psychic threads anymore. He wants the collector dead because you're a symbol, Calyx. A reminder that vampires can choose to be more than monsters. She turned her head toward Rena. And he wants you dead because you're proof that someone completed a blood debt and walked away whole. That can't be allowed to spread. So we're still being hunted, Rena said flatly. You're being hunted by everyone now. Matthias's assassins, vampire nobles who side with him, bounty hunters looking for the price on your heads. Sybil's fingers traced patterns on Rena's palm. But I see something else. A path through the fire. A gamble. What kind of gamble?
Calyx asked.
The kind where one of you doesn't see the sunrise. Sybil released Rena's hands suddenly, leaning back. One of you dies at dawn unless the mark is destroyed. The mark is destroyed, Calyx said. The bond broke when Rena completed the contract. Not that mark, Sybil pointed at Calyx's chest. The mark of kingship. The one Matthias stole from you 50 years ago. It's still inside you, dormant but present. As long as it exists, you'll always be a threat to his throne. He'll never stop hunting you. Rena's stomach dropped. So, how do we destroy it? Sybil smiled, revealing too many teeth. You don't. He does, she pointed at Calyx. The mark can only be destroyed by the one who bears it, and only in the presence of another who's willing to claim the throne in his place. I don't want the throne, Calyx said immediately. I know. That's why you might survive. Sybil stood, signaling the reading was over. Go to the exiles' villa. North of the city, where the old vineyards used to be. Someone's waiting for you there. Who? But Sybil had already turned away, calling to her next customer. Calyx dropped several gold coins on the table. Actual gold, Rena noticed, and pulled her away from the stall. The exiles' villa? Rena asked as they moved back through the crowd. Matthias's predecessor. The king before him. Calyx's face was grim. If he's still alive and still there, things just got a lot more complicated. They stole a car, or rather, Calyx compelled a drunk stockbroker to hand over his keys and forget he'd ever seen them. Rena tried not to think too hard about the ethics as they drove north across the Golden Gate Bridge, leaving the city behind. The villa appeared just as dawn threatened the horizon, a sprawling estate hidden behind overgrown cypress trees and rusted iron gates. It looked abandoned, windows dark, the stone walls covered in ivy that seemed to move even without wind. This is a terrible idea, Rena muttered as Calyx pushed open the gates. They creaked like something from a horror movie. Most of my ideas lately have been terrible. At least I'm consistent. They walked up the long driveway, gravel crunching under their feet. The villa loomed larger as they approached, 3 stories of old Spanish architecture, with balconies that sagged and tiles missing from the roof. A fountain in the circular courtyard had long since run dry, filled now with dead leaves and something that might have been bones. The front door was already open. Welcome, Calyx, the voice came from inside, rich and amused. I wondered when you'd finally come crawling back. They entered a grand foyer that had seen better centuries. Furniture covered in dust sheets, paintings with eyes scratched out, a chandelier that hung at a dangerous angle. And in the center of it all, sitting in a throne-like chair that was probably worth more than Rena's entire former food truck business, was a vampire who made Calyx look young. He was beautiful in the way ancient things sometimes are, all sharp edges and cold elegance. Silver hair despite appearing no older than 40, eyes like frozen mercury, wearing a silk suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Lord Soren, Calyx said carefully. You're still here. Where else would I go? Matthias exiled me, but didn't kill me. His first mistake. Soren's gaze slid to Rena. And you brought a human. How delightfully predictable. She's not. She's your completed debtor. I can smell it on her. Fresh bond. Newly sealed, Soren smiled. The last one, if the rumors are true. You finally closed out your ridiculous charity project. Rena stepped forward before Calyx could respond. The Oracle sent us. Said someone was waiting here. Soren's eyebrows raised. The human speaks. And with spine, no less, he gestured to chairs across from him.
Seat.
Let's discuss why Matthias wants you both dead, shall we? They sat. Rena's exhaustion was catching up with her. She'd been awake for over 24 hours, nearly died multiple times, and completed a blood contract with a vampire. Her body was running on fumes and adrenaline. Matthias took my throne 50 years ago, Soren began, swirling wine in a crystal glass, wine that looked too dark to be grape. Challenged me according to vampire law, defeated me in single combat, and claimed rulership of the Western territories. By rights, he won fairly. Then why exile instead of execution?
Calix asked.
Because killing me would have made me a martyr. I was old, traditional, but not cruel. The vampires of my court respected me. Matthias couldn't risk turning me into a symbol. Soren took a sip of his wine. But you, Calix? You he can't afford to let live. I'm no threat to him. You're the greatest threat he has. Soren leaned forward. Do you know what vampires call you in the underground? The one who chose mercy. You proved that our kind doesn't have to feed through death and terror. You built a system where humans benefited from our power instead of just suffering under it. It was just survival. It was revolution. Soren's voice hardened. And Matthias has spent 50 years trying to erase every trace of it. He's killed your debtors, destroyed your records, spread rumors that your contracts were just as exploitative as traditional hunting. Because if vampires knew there was another way, if humans knew they could bargain with us as equals, he smiled. The entire power structure crumbles. Rena finally understood. That's why he's so desperate. It's not about politics. It's about keeping vampires as monsters. Precisely, Soren pointed at her. This one's clever, Calix. Where did you find her? Dying in an alley 10 years ago. Of course, Soren set down his glass. The Oracle told you about the Mark of Kingship, yes? The one Matthias stole from you when he defeated me? She said it has to be destroyed. It does. Because as long as that mark exists inside you, dormant or not, you're technically still eligible to challenge for the throne. That's vampire law. Any previous king who bears the mark can issue a challenge, regardless of how long they've been dethroned. Calix frowned. I never bore the mark. You did. And I passed it to Matthias when he defeated me. But here's what neither of you understand. Soren stood, moving to a covered mirror on the wall. He pulled the sheet away, revealing glass that didn't quite reflect properly. Images swirled in its depths like oil on water. Matthias didn't just take my throne. He took yours too. I was never king. You were the debt collector, the oath keeper, the one who made contracts binding. Soren turned to face them. That was a position of power, Calix. Different from kingship, but power nonetheless. And when Matthias defeated me, he absorbed all the power of the former regime, including yours. The mirror's surface rippled, showing an image. Calix 50 years ago, standing in the same chamber where they were now, as Matthias drove a blade through Soren's chest. But as Soren fell, light erupted from his body, silver and gold streams that flowed into Matthias. And one stream, smaller than the others, broke away and tried to flee. Matthias caught it, consumed it. That was your power, Soren said quietly. Your ability to forge contracts, to protect debtors, to offer life for blood. He took it all. Then how have I been making contracts for 50 years? Calix demanded. Residual magic. Fading echoes of what you once had. Soren's expression was almost pitying. But it's been weakening, hasn't it? Each deal harder than the last? Each protection less certain. Calix said nothing, but Rena saw the truth in his face. That's why Rena's bond almost broke you, Soren continued. You didn't have enough power left to sustain an incomplete contract for that long. The magic was dying. So, what do we do? Rena asked. Soren smiled, and it wasn't kind. We take it back. Take it back how? Rena stood, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. You just said Matthias absorbed everything. How do you steal power from a vampire king? You don't steal it. Soren moved to a desk covered in maps and papers. You make him give it back voluntarily. Calix laughed bitterly. Matthias would never. Not willingly, no. But vampire law has loopholes, and I've had 50 years to study them. Soren spread out a map of San Francisco, marked with symbols and notes in languages Rena didn't recognize. Matthias took power through victory in single combat. That's the old way. Winner takes all. But there's a clause. If the defeated king can prove the victor cheated, all stolen power reverts. He didn't cheat. I was there. Calix moved closer to the map. It was a fair challenge. Was it? Soren's finger traced a line on the map, following what looked like underground tunnels. Tell me, Calix, did you ever wonder why Matthias challenged me the same week you closed your 100th contract? Why he chose that specific moment? Calix went still. Coincidence. There are no coincidences in vampire politics. Soren pulled out a faded photograph. Calix standing in those same subway tunnels, carving a name into stone. He'd been watching you for decades, waiting for your power to peak. Because when you completed that 100th contract, your ability to forge bonds became legendary. Unbreakable. Powerful enough to threaten any vampire who fed through traditional hunting. So, he eliminated the competition, Rena said. He eliminated the alternative. Soren's mercury eyes gleamed. But here's what he didn't count on. Vampire law states that power taken through combat only stays with the victor if the combat was honorable. And honor requires full disclosure. He didn't tell you he was really after Calix, Rena breathed. Exactly. Soren's smile was sharp. He challenged me under false pretenses, claimed it was about territory disputes, about my outdated methods of ruling. Never mentioned his real goal was to absorb the collector's power and eliminate the entire debt system. Calix shook his head. Even if that's true, how do we prove it? It's been 50 years. We don't need to prove it to a court. We need to prove it to the power itself. Soren tapped the map. Magic has memory. The mark of kingship remembers how it was taken, who it rightfully belongs to, whether the transfer was clean. And if we can expose the deception, the mark will reject Matthias. That sounds theoretical, Rena said. It is. Very. Soren met her eyes. Which is why it might actually work. Matthias has spent half a century consolidating power under the assumption no one would dare challenge him. He's grown comfortable, arrogant. So we trick him. Calix studied the map. Draw him out, expose his deception somehow. No, Rena stepped forward, an idea forming. We don't trick him. We give him exactly what he wants. Both vampires turned to stare at her. He wants Calix dead, she continued, speaking faster as the plan took shape. Wants to eliminate the last symbol of the old way. So we let him think he's won. We lure him into a trap by making him believe he's walking into a victory. Using what is bait?
Soren asked.
Rena took a breath. Me. Absolutely not. Calix moved between her and Soren. You're not putting yourself in danger. I'm already in danger. Those hunters tracked me across the city, crushed my truck, tried to kill me a dozen times. I'm not safe anywhere. She pushed past him to look at the map. But I'm also something Matthias wants dead almost as much as you. Proof that the contract system worked. That a human can complete a blood debt and walk away whole. Soren's expression shifted to something like respect. She's not wrong. She's not trained. Not supernatural. I'm a food truck owner who knows every alley, every maintenance tunnel, every security blind spot in the financial district. Rena pointed to the map. I've spent 5 years navigating the city at night, finding the best spots, avoiding cops and health inspectors and gangs. I know places even vampires don't. And you'd use that knowledge to do what, exactly?
Soren asked.
Rena's mind raced through memories, late-night deliveries, shortcuts she'd discovered, the secret geography of urban survival. There's an underground river channel beneath the old financial district. Runs from Market Street to the bay. City maintenance uses it during heavy rain, but otherwise it's empty. Sealed off from public access. I know it, Calix said slowly. Tourist groups used to access it through the Embarcadero, but they closed it 15 years ago after someone got hurt. But the maintenance entrance is still active. Rena traced the route on the map. and it connects to the subway tunnels where we were hiding. Multiple exit points, places to set traps. And she looked at Soren. It's full of running water. Soren's smile widened. Vampires and running water don't mix well. Weakens us. Makes our powers unreliable. But humans are fine in it, Rena said. So if we lure Matthias and his hunters there, they're at a disadvantage, and I can move freely. Calix grabbed her shoulders. Rena, this is insane. You'd be facing down a vampire king and his assassins in a flooded tunnel. If anything goes wrong, then I die. Again, she met his eyes. But I already did that once, remember? You gave me 10 years I shouldn't have had. Maybe it's time I use them for something that matters. Soren clapped his hands once. I like her. Calix, you should have made her a vampire instead of just a debtor. She gets a say in that, Calix said quietly. And I'm saying we do this, Rena turned to Soren. How do we make Matthias come to us? Soren's grin was all predator. Simple. We tell him the collector is weak, wounded, and ready to surrender. We tell him the human girl is offering herself as bait to save her vampire master. We make him think it's a trap so obvious that he'll walk into it just to prove his superiority. And the real trap?
Calix asked.
We weaken the bond between Matthias and the stolen power. Force him to confront the truth of how he took it. Soren pulled out an ancient book bound in what looked disturbingly like skin. There's a ritual. Old magic. It requires 3 things. The collector who lost his power, the king who stole it, and a witness whose life was changed by that power. He looked at Rena. That's you. Rena swallowed hard. What does the witness have to do? Survive, Soren said simply. And make him admit why he really wanted Calix's power destroyed. That's it. That's everything. Soren closed the book. Truth is the most powerful magic there is, especially when spoken by someone with nothing left to lose. Rena thought about her destroyed food truck, her old life scattered like ashes, the names carved in stone in those tunnels, all those people Calix had saved, all the ones Matthias had killed to protect his throne. Then let's give him a truth he can't escape. The underground river channel was exactly as Rena remembered, 50 feet wide, water rushing ankle-deep during the dry season, concrete walls slick with algae and decades of grime. Industrial lights flickered overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow. The sound of flowing water echoed like whispers. They had 3 hours to prepare. Soren had sent word through the night market. Careful, coded messages that would reach Matthias within the hour. The collector is wounded and cornered. The human girl is bait. Come at dawn to the old water channel. Claim your final victory. Now Rena stood in the center of the channel, water soaking through her sneakers, while Calix and Soren positioned themselves at opposite ends of the tunnel. Remember, Soren called out, his voice bouncing off concrete. When Matthias arrives, he'll try to end this quickly. Don't let him.
Keep him talking.
Make him explain. The more he reveals, the more the stolen power will recognize the deception. And if he just kills me immediately? Rena asked. Then we've failed, Soren shrugged. Try not to die. Helpful, Rena muttered. Calix appeared beside her, moving through the water silently. You don't have to do this. We can still run. Where? She turned to face him. He'll hunt us forever. Hunt everyone whose name is carved in those tunnels. Everyone who might inspire other vampires to choose your way instead of his. She took a breath. This ends tonight, one way or another. Calix looked at her for a long moment. You're braver than anyone I've given life to in 300 years. Or stupider. Both can be true, he almost smiled. Then he pressed something into her hand, a small knife with a silver blade. If it goes wrong, aim for the heart or the throat. Anywhere else, and you'll just make him angry. Rena stared at the weapon. This is really happening. Yes. And you think I can actually? I think you already blew up 3 vampire hunters with a propane tank and kitchen oil. I think you completed a blood debt everyone said was impossible. I think. He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. I think you're the first human in a very long time who's treated me like I'm worth saving. Before Rena could respond, the water around them began to ripple. Not from current, from power. He's here, Soren said sharply. Positions. Calix and Soren vanished into the shadows at either end of the channel. Rena stood alone in the center, gripping the silver knife behind her back, feeling the water pull at her ankles. Matthias appeared at the north entrance. He was nothing like Reno expected.
No dramaticape, no habeas menis.
He looked like a Silicon Valley executive, expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of face that appeared on magazine covers under headlines about innovation and disruption. Young, handsome, confident. But his eyes were ancient and hungry. The little baker, his voice was smooth, almost friendly. You've caused me considerable trouble. Good, Rena managed, trying to keep her voice steady. I aim to please. Matthias walked into the water without hesitation, though Rena saw him wince slightly as it touched his shoes. Where's the collector? Hiding like a coward. I'm here, Calix stepped into the light at the south end. You wanted me dead, Matthias. Here I am. How accommodating, Matthias smiled. Though I notice Lord Soren is also present. Planning a reunion? Soren emerged from the shadows. Someone has to bear witness when you fall. Fall.
Matthias Laukit.
I've ruled for 50 years. Expanded our territories. Returned vampires to their rightful place as apex predators. What have you done but cower in exile and enable a bleeding heart who thinks monsters should play house with their food? I preserve the old ways, Soren said coldly. You perverted them. I perfected them. Matthias's smile vanished. And tonight, I erase the last obstacle to my reign. He moved toward Calix with inhuman speed, but the running water slowed him. Not much, but enough. Calix met him halfway, and they collided like thunder. Rena had seen Calix fight hunters. This was different. This was two ancient vampires with centuries of experience, trading blows that would have killed any human instantly. They crashed through the water, slammed into walls, moved too fast for Rena's eyes to track. But Calix was still weakened. And Matthias was stronger. Within minutes, Matthias had Calix pinned against the concrete wall, hand around his throat. Any last words, Collector? Yes, Calix's voice was strained but clear. Why did you really challenge Soren 50 years ago? Matthias's grip tightened. To claim his throne. Everyone knows this. But you didn't just want his throne. Rena stepped forward, voice carrying across the water. You wanted Calix's power. The ability to forge contracts. To offer humans real choices. Sentiment is not power. Then why steal it? Rena moved closer, her heart hammering. Why go through the trouble of absorbing his magic if it's so worthless? Why spend 50 years hunting down everyone he ever made a deal with? Why dedicate your entire reign to erasing proof that vampires can be something other than killers? Matthias turned to look at her, eyes blazing. Because mercy is weakness. No, Soren's voice rang out. Because mercy is an alternative. And you couldn't allow vampires to have a choice. Vampires are predators.
Matthias Roaret.
We are supposed to hunt, to feed, to dominate, not make bargains with cattle. There it is, Calix gasped. The truth. You didn't challenge Soren for power. You challenged him to eliminate the choice I represented. The water around them began to glow. Rena saw it first, silver light rising from beneath the surface, swirling around Matthias's legs like chains. The mark of kingship, responding to the admission. What? Matthias released Calix, staggering backward. Vampire law, Soren said, voice hard with satisfaction. Power taken through deception cannot be held. You challenged me under false pretenses. The mark knows. The magic knows. The light grew brighter, streaming from Matthias's chest toward Calix. Threads of silver and gold, the stolen power recognizing its rightful bearer.
No.
Matthias lunged at Rena. If I can't have it, neither will he. Rena raised the silver knife, but she wasn't fast enough. Calix was. He caught Matthias mid-lunge, and together they crashed into the water. The impact created a wave that knocked Rena off her feet, and when she surfaced, Gasping, she saw them, locked together, the light pouring between them like liquid fire. Take it back, Matthias snarled. Take your cursed mercy and choke on it. Gladly, Calix pressed his palm to Matthias's chest. I release you from the power you stole. I reclaim what was always mine. The light exploded outward, and Rena felt it, the snap of magic returning to its source. Contracts were forming, bonds strengthening. Every name carved in those tunnel walls suddenly protected again, every debtor shielded by the collector's restored power. Matthias collapsed into the water, weakened but alive. And Calix stood, whole again, the mark of his old power blazing on his chest. It's done, Soren said quietly. Rena dragged herself upright, soaked and shaking. Is he?
Defeated. Broken.
But alive, Calix looked down at Matthias. Because unlike you, I don't believe in needless killing.
Matthias laughed weakly.
Still so righteous. You'll never be king, collector. I don't want to be, Calix turned away. I just want to keep my promises. Dawn broke over San Francisco Bay in shades of gold and pink, the kind of sunrise that made the city look almost magical. Rena sat on the hood of the stolen car, which they definitely need to return, watching the light spread across the water. Her clothes were still damp from the river channel. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. She was pretty sure she had a cracked rib, her hands were bandaged from various cuts, and she hadn't slept in 36 hours. She'd never felt more alive. Calix emerged from the warehouse behind her, carrying 2 cups of coffee from a 24-hour convenience store. He handed her one, and she wrapped her frozen fingers around it gratefully. Soren's handling Matthias, he said, leaning against the car beside her. Taking him before the Vampire Council. Without the stolen power, he's just another noble. They'll strip his territories, exile him like they did Soren. Will that stick? It will now. The mark of kingship is back where it belongs. With its true bearer, Calix looked at her. Though I meant what I said. I don't want the throne. Then what do you want? He was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise. To finish what I started. Close out the remaining protections. Make sure all my debtors are truly free. Then he shrugged. Maybe disappear for a while. Let someone else deal with vampire politics. Sounds lonely. It usually is. He took a sip of coffee, made a face too hot. What about you? You're free now. Contract completed. Bond severed cleanly. You could go anywhere, do anything. Start over.
Rena thought about that.
Starting over. She'd done it once already, running from her fear, and that had nearly gotten them both killed. Maybe running wasn't the answer. My food truck is scrap metal, she said. My apartment lease is up next month. I have about $600 in savings and no plan, she smiled. On the other hand, I know a vampire who might need someone familiar with city navigation, late-night operations, and improvisational combat involving kitchen equipment. Calix turned to look at her. You want to stay? I want to help, she met his eyes. You spent 300 years giving people second chances. Maybe I want to pay that forward. Help you find the others, make sure they're safe. Close out whatever protection contracts are left, she paused. Unless you prefer to work alone? I've worked alone for 50 years. It's overrated, something like hope flickered across his face. But you understand what you'd be signing up for? Traveling to find debtors, dealing with supernatural communities, possibly facing more hunters if Matthias has loyal followers. Sounds more interesting than flipping burgers at 3 a.m. It doesn't pay well. Or at all, actually. I noticed you have gold coins. I'm sure we'll manage. Rena bumped her shoulder against his. Besides, someone needs to make sure you actually eat regularly. 6 weeks without feeding? That's just irresponsible health management. Calix laughed, genuinely laughed, and Rena realized she'd never heard that sound from him before. You're insane, says the vampire who spent 3 centuries making deals with dying people because he didn't want to be a monster. Fair point. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city wake up. Early morning joggers appeared on the waterfront trail. Coffee shops began opening their doors. Delivery trucks rumbled past. The normal world, continuing on, completely unaware that a vampire civil war had just been resolved in an underground river channel. So, what happens now? Rena asked. Soren handles Matthias. You reclaim your power, and then? Then we start with the closest debtor. There's a woman in Sacramento, Maria Chen. I made a deal with her grandmother 70 years ago, promised to protect the family bloodline for 3 generations. I need to verify she's safe. Maybe close that contract if the terms are met. Road trip to Sacramento. Sounds normal enough. After that, there's a former debtor in Portland who might have information about Matthias's network. Then someone in Seattle, another in Phoenix, he trailed off. It's a lot of work. Good thing you've got help now. Calix looked at her seriously. Rena, I need you to understand. This isn't a blood bond anymore. You don't owe me anything. If you do this, you're choosing it freely. And you can walk away whenever you want. I know, she finished her coffee, crushing the cup. That's why I'm choosing to stay. Not because I'm bound to you, not because I owe you, but because I saw those names in the tunnel. All those people you saved. And I think they deserve someone fighting to keep them safe. Even if it's dangerous? Especially if it's dangerous. Someone very annoying once told me that fear is the most honest thing about humans. Maybe it's time I was honest about mine. I'm not afraid of the danger. I'm afraid of going back to pretending none of this matters. The sun cleared the horizon fully now, flooding the bay with light. Rena felt its warmth on her face and thought about dying in an alley 10 years ago. Thought about running from her second chance. Thought about finally standing still and choosing something that mattered. One condition, she said. What's that? We get a new food truck. Mobile base of operations, she grinned. And I'm naming it. Calix smiled.
Deal.
They shook on it and Rena noticed something. There was no magical light, no psychic bond, no mystical connection. Just 2 people choosing to work together because it was the right thing to do. Not a servant. Not a debtor. Not a victim. Just Rena Bennett, who died once, got a second chance, almost wasted it running away, and finally figured out how to actually live. She hopped off the car hood. Come on. We should return this car before someone reports it stolen. Then we need to get breakfast, actual food, not gas station coffee, and start planning our route to Sacramento. You're very organized for someone who just survived a vampire assassination attempt. Years of food truck management. You learn to plan ahead. She started walking toward the driver's side. Also, I'm going to need new clothes. These smell like river water and burnt propane. Add it to the list. There's a list? There's always a list. They drove back toward the city as the morning rush began. 2 unlikely partners with a car that wasn't theirs, a mission that would probably take years, and absolutely no guarantee of success. But for the first time in a decade, Rena wasn't running. She was exactly where she chose to be. And that made all the difference. The end.